The electric telegraph system was invented by Samuel Morse in 1837. He devised a system of dots and dashes to represent letters and numbers, and a machine that would transmit these codes along wires strung on poles between sender and receiver. This quickly revolutionised communications around the world. Tasmania began electric telegraphy in 1857 with a line from Hobart to Launceston. It was extended to Georgetown and Lowhead by 1858. Other lines followed, including marine cables to Victoria. Interestingly, the arrival of mails was signalled by raising flags at the telegraphic offices. In 1871, a number of new telegraph stations were added, including one to 9 Mile Springs, later called Lefroy. Many of these extensions were largely a result of mining discoveries and the need for shipping intelligence. In 1881, contracts were advertised for the extension of the telegraph line from Lefroy via Back Creek to Bridport, Ringarooma, Gladstone and Marina. Walsh's Almanac of 1887 lists the telegraphic stations and their operators. Only 1 year later, the Warden of the Hobart Marine Board, Mr. Facey, was advocating an extension of the North East Line from Boobyalla to Cape Portland, and then by submarine cable to Swan Island, illustrating just how much commerce relied on shipping and not road transport. By 1885, the best locations for the marine cable on Swan Island and Little Musserow had been identified, although problems with currents and a rocky bottom were noted. By November 1885, the cable had been laid between Little Musserow and Swan Island by the cable ship Sherard Osborne. 19 kilometres of overland telegraph line then had to connect to the nearest telegraph station at Boobyalla. Tenders for building this section were advertised the same year. The cable came ashore at Little Musserow, and Adrian Cassidy told me that the original cable could still be found sticking out of the beach. We decided to investigate. So yesterday we went out to Low Head, the start of the North East Telegraph line in North Eastern Tassie. Today we're heading up the other end of the line to Little Musserow and Swan Island to see if we can find the old marine cable that used to stretch across from Little Musserow to Swan Island.
But anyway, that's something we can take with you. And I've just got the zip ties on it just to hold it so it doesn't fall apart.
Well, much appreciated.
It's quite an interesting thing. It's sat up on the beach there for a lot of years. A lot of people walk past it and
wonder what it was.
What it is.
Well, we'll see what we can find. Well, getting pretty close to our destination for today. Coming down the hill into Little Musserow.
Looking at the wind farm.
On one of those incredible days when there's virtually no wind, and we'll be able to see Swan Island very shortly.
The sea's calm.
There it is. That's where the telegraph line finished. Well, here we are at Little Musserow, about to go on the beach and see if we can track down the cable. We can already see parts of it hanging out of the beach.
Well, that didn't take a lot of finding.
Yeah, but this is not the bit we're going for. This is the bit that's broken off. So it's not very far across to Swan Island, is it really?
Too far for me to swim.
So we're looking for ends of the cable sticking out of the bank. So that's the cable. So see, that's broken as well. They'd have the transition between the cable and the lines somewhere just up there. Yeah, that's a good the fact that you've cut through. Shows you just how strong it is.
Yeah, it's quite strong. So,
But if you look across, you can see why it comes here, look, Roger, because we're in a direct line of Swan Island.
Yeah.
See? Over there.
It was noted that there were risks to the cable from strong currents and a rocky bottom that could chafe the cable, even though it was heavily armoured. The cable was broken only 6 years later, repaired and then broken again, and repaired in 1893. The tug Waibia was sent from Georgetown with grappling apparatus and 1,100 yards of cable. After struggling with storms and strong currents, the broken ends of the cable were retrieved and a new cable spliced in. The broken cable was retrieved by using a Lowe's patent steam anchor and an underslung cable from the shores. 200 yards of the old cable were brought back, and all of it showed signs of its friction with a rocky seabed. By 1893, the cable had broken again and was deemed unreliable. The telegraph offices at Swan Island, Boobialla were closed. The disused lines from Boobialla to Bridport and from Ringarooma to Alberton were dismantled. Telegraphy had been superseded by the telephone.
Now from here, the cable would have run straight through here to a connection between the landline, which will be up there somewhere. I'm going to fly the drone to get a bit of a shot.
We could not find any signs of the old telegraph line that ran from here towards Tregarron House, but were told that an old hut, possibly the cable connection hut, had been removed and used as part of a shack at Little Musselrow. Again, the exact position of the line is currently unknown, but early land district charts show tracks that probably indicate the telegraph line, and an old photograph labelled as Telegraph House, Cape Portland, suggests the line existed here. From Little Musselrow and Cape Portland, the line ran over reasonably level ground towards Boobialla. We found no poles to verify this, but the district chart shows the location, and interestingly, the relatively new high voltage power line from the wind farm now follows the same route for quite some distance. From the drone, in the distance we can see Boobialla and the direction of the telegraph line. It is hard to envisage just how difficult it must have been to clear a line through the bush in this area. We know that the insulators were often fixed to trees, but the line would have to have been cleared to some extent. We decided to explore this area and search for any evidence of the line, poles or insulators. To do this, we had permission to visit the Red Hills property. Well, here we are again, off on another trip. This time we've got Rod and Roger with us. We're going to do some metal detecting and see if we can find more signs of the old telegraph station out at Red Hills property. Turn it around to face yourself and me. Just rotate it 360 or 180.
I thought so.
So here we are, somewhere near Red Hills, looking for the old telegraph line that was put through here in 1882. So we don't know whether there's anything left, anything still here or not. And the GPS, here we are.
Time to take a reference and look at the GPS.
Well, that's where we're heading for. And according to this, it's 900 metres to go. So, according to my map application, we are basically on the old road that went from the old coast road that went from Boobialla up to Cape Portland. And if we look out the window, we can see obviously what used to be an old track of some kind. And according to this, the telegraph line was only a few metres in front of us. So we'll go over this next hill and see if we can track it down. So according to the map, We're standing on virtually the exact location of the line of the telegraph. Ran from Boobyalla through there, all the way through to Cape Portland and then to Swan Island up there. There would have been a line of poles through here somewhere with copper wire and insulators, but doesn't look as though we could find any poles. This old track I'm walking along now could have been the part of the old track next to the line where people used to bring the mail along here every week from Georgetown, riding through here, and this might be what remains of that track, which would have been ridden by a horseman carrying bags of mail to the various settlements out here. Unfortunately, we can't see any poles, but they've probably long since gone. Well,
Sam, why would you find a bit of wire just here?
yeah, good point. Well, this is where we think the telegraph line went through, so that might be an indication, mightn't it? Well, we're not sure, but we found something.
Well, there's still some
Another bit of wire.
that's twisted wire.
Some. Oh yeah.
That's why I've been tied off.
Finished the ground search, now let's take to the air and see if we can relocate the old telegraph poles I discovered on an earlier visit to Bowler's Lagoon. According to the district charts, the old road and telegraph line crossed our flight path somewhere near here. It is obvious that the lagoon has undergone significant changes even in recent years. We are looking for a line of poles seen about 20 or 30 years ago. Also visiting the remains of the old bridge across the Ringrim River in the 1880s, part of the old Cape Portland Road. I had been here in the late 1970s on various survival camps. In one image you can see poles alongside the bridge remains, but I don't think these could have been telegraph poles.
Yeah. Oh, wicket. Fence. Right. Fence. We found a fence. Part of a fence.
On the 1999 survival camp, students found part of the old boundary fence that once marked Reverend Brown's farm. In later years, this was covered by sand dunes. Flying in the direction taken by earlier survival camps, we were searching for poles. But what was puzzling was that the earlier telegraph line must surely have gone around the much bigger Bowler's Lagoon. Yet here we saw poles heading towards the lagoon. This pole looked different. It appeared to be much more recent and unweathered. Initially, I thought the telegraph line followed the early property boundary of the 1836 property of Reverend Brown of Georgetown, but this would have crossed the original large lagoon. Looking at later district charts reveal that the telegraph line and road crossed at the old bridge, then probably took a sharp turn eastward, running parallel to the lagoon and then turning north. This matches up with routes shown on the later district charts and the cadastral layers in the list map. There is no doubt that the telegraph line ran across this area. Photographs taken on at least 3 visits confirm this. It is also confusing that there are more than one set of poles running in different directions, both of which have some insulators remaining. Whether the line ran across Bowler's Lagoon is also unknown, though unlikely. I do intend to visit the area on foot in the near future to see if we can resolve these contradictions. What we really need is a survey map showing the actual route. We now turn and trace the line and Cape Road back to the location of the telegraph station at Boobialla. We know the bridge was in place in the 1880s, as it is shown on old maps. The old roadway was still visible on the 1949 aerial photographs, and you can see where the road crossed the Ringarooma River. Even before the discovery of tin in northeast Tasmania, Boobialla and Bridport were vital transport hubs for shipping produce such as wool and supplies to and from Launceston and Georgetown. An 1889 map of Boobialla shows an impressive layout, but in practice there are only a few buildings. There were 2 hotels, one run by Donald Campbell, the other by Mr. J.T. Smith, a church, police station, school, residences and store. The most important structures were 2 wharves or jetties. Donald Campbell's can still be seen today, though the wooden decking has gone and the water is now some distance away. Donald Campbell's home and hotel in the 1920s, and a sketch of the planned layout shows the use of each room, including the post office, and the occupants of each room about 1918. An 1880s photo of the Caledonian Hotel has a number of the local identities sitting outside, including Donald Campbell, sitting, George Groves Sr. sitting, and members of the Dawes, Lyle, Bonningham, Bailey, Cleaver and Ross families. During a 2000 visit to the site, I arranged members of the North East Field Naturalists to duplicate the scene in the 1880s. It appears that at one stage there was a separate post office and telegraph station run by Mr. J.T. Smith after Donald Campbell retired. The closure of the Swan Island connection and the building of the railway led to the removal of the telegraph line from Bridport to Boobialla in 1894. From Boobialla, once called Ringarooma, the telegraph line ran west, crossing the Little Boobialla River and passing Captain Thomas Morgan's property. He had settled at Boobialla about 1879 with his wife Sarah and 2 children, Kate and William. Thomas and Sarah are buried in the Boobialla Cemetery, along with Donald Campbell and members of the Farquhar family. On the survival camp, we would paddle the Little Boobialla River and take students up to the remains of the old Morgan homestead and spread a little local history. From Morgan's, the old road and telegraph line ran close to the coast towards present-day Tomahawk, through an area that has been considered as a large wind farm of up to 210 turbines, each about 270 metres high. The old coast road can be seen below, but after the bridge across the Little Boobialla River was closed, it is difficult to use. The next place of significance along the line is Lyndhurst, once a scene of industry as up to 1,000 gold miners sought their fortunes in underground hard rock mining in 1869. It was here there was a quick flash in the pan with cases of salting to fool investors. At one time it had 4 hotels, police station, courthouse, jail, residence, stables and a blacksmith shop. The rush was short-lived. By 1873 the town was deserted, but interest was rekindled in the 1880s with some large quantities of gold found. Even today, if you know where to look, there are relics of the gold mining days. Stone buildings housing the crushing plant, bricks from chimneys, and lifting gear that raised miners and ore from underground. The Royal Mail arrived at Lyndhurst on Thursdays and Saturdays at 1:30 p.m. A number of people acted as postmasters, including A.J. Morrison. By 1893, the post office was operated from Boobyalla by Mabel Lyle. No mention of a telegraph office has been found, but it is assumed that this did exist here, as the old maps indicate the line heading for Lyndhurst. The dotted red line shows the location of the telegraph line from Lyndhurst to Bridport. The rest of the route is only speculation, but we do know that it ended just east of the Brid River Bridge, at a telegraph station in the house next to the old Forester Inn building. When Bully Barnett demolished this house, he discovered the old telegrams in the roof. These give interesting snippets of information about people and their work in the 1880s. Samuel Hawkes managed the Arbor tin mine at Branxholme and apparently had borrowed some sort of ironwork from David Johnson of Bridport. Other telegrams were sent from a Mr. Crask of Bridport, who was a shipping agent for Dinham Steamship Company operating between Bridport and Launceston in the 1880s.
Come in.
Urgent. We've run out of beer. Could you send that telegram, please?
Right, Deverne, Branxholme, 10 words that'll cost you a shilling.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Okay, I'll send it now.
This is the time it would have taken to send a 10-word message by the telegraphic system. Imagine how long it would take for a lengthy message. Operators had to be able to transmit up 40 to 60 words a minute, though some were much faster.
Finished.
This urgent telegram for beer would have been transmitted through this wire to the next station at Scottsdale, then relayed to Branxholme. The first person in charge of the telegraph was Miss Robinson, and later Mr. and Mrs. P.R. Brewer. Coming to the port of Bridport in 1882, telegraphy shows how important this was to business and transport by comparison with the postal service. A snapshot of the status of telegraphy in Tasmania in 1882 shows that this was the year lines were extended to many parts of the northeast, with 7 new stations, and a link through to the east coast. Up until 1900, extension of services was rapid. The following statistics from 1887 annual reports show just how many messages were being sent throughout the northeast. In 1889, the year the railway came to Scottsdale, a new post and telegraph office was opened, and by 1897 all the telegraphic stations had been amalgamated with post offices. The decline of the telegraphic stations had begun in 1894, when a number of stations and line were closed in the northeast. Searching through old photographs taken throughout the northeast, we can still see evidence of the telegraph system even after 1900, although in some cases these might have been converted to the telephone network. From the late 1890s, the once extensive network of stations and lines throughout the northeast was being replaced by the telephone connections. On the Billycock Hill, near the Snake Track, the telegraph line split, with one line running to Ringarooma and Alberton, while the other continues to Branxholme, the Brothers' Home and Marina. In the year that these coaches were bogged, the telegraph lines had been installed. You can see them faintly above the coaches. Davins Hotel, Branxholme, where the Beer in Coronella telegram was sent on the 4th of April 1883. No doubt it arrived earlier than if it had been sent by coach or horseback over the Billycock and Ledgerwood Lane. The telegraph line to Ringarooma had been open since 1882, and in 1893 over 1,200 telegrams were transmitted. The line to Alberton extended from Ringarooma in 1885, no doubt due to the surge in gold mining. However, it was short-lived, being closed in 1894. Derby was listed as the brothers' home in the telegraph records, and in 1887 transmitted over 2,800 messages. By 1893, this had dropped to just over 2,100 messages. Marina, once the administrative mining centre, was where the East Coast and Northern telegraph systems met. The extension of the line from Gould's Country to Marina was made in 1883 to complete the connection. In 1889, Marina sent over 3,300 messages. At Pioneer and Gladstone, we can see evidence of the telegraphic system, and in 1919, when Governor Sir Francis Newdigate and Lady Newdigate visited both towns, no doubt the telegraphic system helped coordinate the proceedings. At Gladstone, the local band and schoolchildren performed for the Rice Regal Party. The telegraph line was extended from Gladstone to Edison Point in 1889 after the lighthouse had been constructed. This was an important link for shipping, as the Swan Island line had been closed because the marine cable was broken. We have nearly completed a circuit of the northeast, starting at Low Head and Lefroy, tracing the telegraph line geographically and back in time to Bridport, through to Scottsdale, Branxholme, Ringarooma, Alberton, Derby, Marina, Pioneer, Gladstone and Swan Island. In 1883, the line traversed some difficult terrain, sand dunes, lagoons, heavily forested and mountainous. All of this had to be patrolled by linesmen on a regular basis. Spare a thought for these men who in all kinds of weather followed the line through forest, scrub and sand, crossing swollen rivers, keeping the line open. Unfortunately, some lost their lives in doing so. People in those days would gasp in disbelief as we watch high-definition TV beamed through satellites and enjoy communications from all parts of the world. But with all this extra information about what is happening, are we any happier?